The Ramchal had cited the Zohar that to know who God is, it's an impossibility. Because if God's wisdom and ability is infinite, it's impossible to understand, even to fathom what that is. But we say in the Aleinu, which is the conclusion of the morning service and the conclusion of every service of the day, Pasuk in the Torah, verse in the Torah, you should know today and take it to heart that there's nobody like God in heaven and earth. Ain't owed. There's nobody like God. So what is the objective of understanding, to understand God, to take to heart? That no one's comparable to him. Not in any area of existence. So by understanding nothing's comparable to him, automatically he is the one. So it's from realizing, appreciating who he is, and only by making that discernment, we understand that nobody's like him, but not that we understand who he is. And the Zohar says, we know God is Hakim. He has wisdom. But we don't know that, we don't recognize the Hakim. We don't recognize the wise man. We know he knows. We don't recognize the one who knows. We know he knows, and nobody's could be compared to his knowing. We mentioned that an angel does not know the thoughts of a human being. The only one who knows the thoughts of a human being is only God himself. Why does God know the thoughts of a human being? Seems to be concealed. So we'd explained that since the process of creation is an ongoing process, as we say every day in the first bracha of the Birchas Kriya Shema, God continuously renews the act of creation. Initially, when God created the human being, and you have the brain, you have the intellectual faculty, whatever that its function may be, retention of information, analysis, processing, whatever that is. How did it come about? Because God willed that faculty to function exactly as it functions, with all its capacities, all its potential. That faculty functions not because it existed a moment ago. It's because it continuously wills that function, the chemical activity, the brain activity. Everything that relates to the brain is continuously willed to function. So there's every aspect of that activity, which is the basis for thoughts and for decisions and everything else. God provides that ability every moment. Therefore, God is aware of our thoughts. He's aware of our actions. He's aware of where we're at. Because wherever we're at, whatever exists, wherever that at may be, because he wills that at. He wills that location. Angel wills nothing. Angel is purely an agent of God, and the angel only knows what God gives it the capacity to understand. So only God knows man's thoughts. We find that one of the 13 tenets of Jewish belief is God knows our thoughts. Not only our actions, he knows our thoughts. Why is that such an important tenet of Jewish belief? If a person does a mitzvah, so the mitzvah, the action, is external. But in terms of the innate value of the mitzvah, what determines the innate value of the mitzvah? The intent. With what do you infuse it with? Do you do it out of fear? Do you do it out of reverence? Do you do it out of love? Or you slightly distracted? All that has to do with the thought process. So if that's the case, how could God provide appropriate reward and punishment if he's not aware of our thoughts? Being aware of our thoughts is integral to evaluate the innate value of that action. Because the thought itself is integral to our behavior. You may look like a tzaddik, but you're far from it. Because nobody knows what's going on in your mind. But since God does know what's going on in your mind, he's able to make that exact evaluation and classify the person exactly what he is. Is he tzaddik? Is he chosid? Is he middle of the road? Is he Russia, or God forbid he's evil? Is he doing it due to desire, or he's doing it due to being defiant? What exactly? But only based on that evaluation is God able to reward or punish the person as he deserves to be punished. Therefore, God has to know if the tenet is reward and punishment. Automatically, we have to say God, and that's why it's a tenet. God knows our thoughts, not only our actions. What's in the depth of the earth? What's in the oceans? What the species? How many species are there? Only God knows. Because God wills every one of those species to function exactly as it does, and its physical makeup is exactly what it is, because God wills it should be that way. But why? What do we need so many species? What do we need so many species? Each species is unique in the way it functions in the ocean. You know what the answer is? Only God knows. Certain things, it's unfathomable. It's not possible to know. We don't know the numbers. We don't even know species even exist. Endless species may exist at the bottom of the ocean. We're not even aware of it. There may be species in the center of the earth that we're not aware of. Until God allows us to be aware of it. But again, all that, because there's nothing God doesn't know. So he's chokim, the Zohar says. He's wise. But we don't understand who that wise one is. He's perceptive. We don't know who that perceptive being is. We know he is because there's nothing comparable to him being wise, perceptive, and whatever else he does. There's nothing comparable to that. Just thinking while I'm talking, we find in the first paragraph of the Shema, we say, Vishenanton levonecho. There's an obligation to teach your students. Shinantam levonecho is a Torah obligation, as the Rambam rules in the first chapter of even the first law in the laws of Talmud Torah, that kol chocham v'chocham chayv lamed ben chaver. Every person who has Torah knowledge, chocham, you have an obligation to teach the son of your fellow Jew. And why? Because it says first paragraph of Shema, Vishinantum novenecho, you must teach bonecho, and who are bonecho? Bonecho el tamidecho. Your children, your sons are your students. And he cites a verse that we find that the students who are mentored to be prophets, they refer to as the sons of the prophets, although they weren't their biological sons. They were the students. So you see, a student is referred to as a son. So we say in the Shema, Vishinantum levonecho, bonecho el tamidecho, the children, the sons are your students. But what's the term Vishinantum? Shinun. Shinun means sharp. You should teach it in a manner where it's with a sharpness. So the Talmud tells us that a person has to be so adept in Torah knowledge that the moment the person asks you a question, you have to be able to respond immediately, without hesitation. It should be sharp in your mouth. Just comes immediately. Pose the question, it comes. When you present novelé, it continuously flows. That's the mastership a person has in Torah itself. It's ongoing, unceasing. What is that? That unceasingness, that dimension of Torah, no hesitation. You know what that's a semblance of? Could you imagine God wills existence, and there should ever be a lapse for a moment in his willing existence? What would happen if there's a lapse? There's no existence. Because if the basis for existence is he wills at every moment, since the very beginning of creation, and things evolve and manifest themselves exactly the way he wills it to be, if he should ever take a moment to cease that, what happens? There's no existence. We revert back to pre-existence. So what is existence? Existence is an ongoing willing. There's a verse in Prophets where the Navi says, Yeshaya Navi, Im lo brisi yom v'loilo, if not for my covenant being in place day and night, the extent of heaven and earth would not be in place. So the Zohar says that if there's ever a moment in existence where there's no Jew studying Torah at any one moment, the world will revert back to pre-existence. That's imlo brisi, if not for my covenant, yom v'layla, day and night being in effect, the extent of heaven and earth would not be in place. So what does that mean? It has to be unceasing. As God's willing is unceasing, and that's why existence exists. So if the basis for existence is, and the objective is the study of Torah, identically the study of Torah has to be unceasing. You have to have minimally one person somewhere in existence studying at every moment, otherwise the world reverts back to pre-existence. The special Torah scholar, the special Talmud Chacham, at what level does his proficiency have to be in Torah? Anything you ask him, without hesitation, he responds. That's v'shinantum l'panecha. He responds with an adeptness, with a sharpness, without hesitation. There was a person, his name was Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, Zech Tzaddik Levrocha. He was the Rosh Yeshiva in the Mir in Israel. Passed away maybe 40 years ago, 45 years ago. And before the students would take a semester break or a summer break, he would say to them, you realize you're going home, you have to take a vacation, you have to relax, and you have to recharge your batteries. So when you come back fully refreshed to be able to, again, be immersed and involved in Torah study. But he says, but even when you take the break, you have to continue studying. You have to have study times. Why? Because it's called Bein Hazmanim. That's between, it means between semesters. So he says, regarding anything else, you have a break, a vacation break. He says, you ever take a vacation from life? If Torah is the life of the Jew, that's the heartbeat of the Jew. Do you say Bein HaChaim? Well, for the next 2-3 weeks, we have Bein HaChaim. We're going to check out from life. There's no such thing. Can't check out. You have to continue. The process has to be continuing. You got to keep breathing. Your heart has to keep beating. Otherwise, God forbid, the person is no longer alive. What fuels existence is the Torah itself. It goes hand in hand. As God releases these spiritual energies, we generate those spiritual energies. We activate them. How do we activate them? By addressing the objective and the value and purpose of creation, which is the Torah itself, the study of Torah itself. So just as God unceasingly wills existence, we have to unceasingly provide the fuel for that existence, which is the study of the Torah itself. That's the understanding. But God, we know He's Hakim, but we don't know who He is. But one thing we do know, there's no one as wise as Him. We know He's perceptive, but we don't know how perceptive He is. But there's no one as perceptive as Him. So as I said, we speak about speculation. What is the basis to speculate? Everything in our lives, the only reason why we have a chance we can even come upon them is because somehow in our background, it's part of our frame of reference. But if it was never part of your frame of reference, it's impossible to come upon it. A person was born in a cocoon, never left the cocoon, and was never exposed to what the world is. Could he speculate what the world is? He was never exposed to anything, whatever the world may be. So it's not part of his frame of reference. So how's there even the chance he can consider coming upon whatever that may be? Nobody's ever come upon what God is. Nobody, no creation. So how could you speculate what God is if he's not part of anybody's frame of reference? Because there's nothing comparable to him. Therefore, you're not permitted. You're not even permitted to speculate what existed pre-existence, which was only God himself. So if it's God himself, it's something, it's impossible to fathom what that is. So there's no basis for speculation. Therefore, we're not permitted even to go there. He cites the Talmud, it says, what's removed from you, don't even delve there. Something which has always been concealed from you, don't try to do analysis on it, because there's no basis for the analysis. And then he says, in Rotz Libcho, he quotes the Sefer Yetzirah, which is the basis for all Kabbalah, even before the Zohar. If your heart is racing, meaning if your desire is to know, you have an uncontrollable desire, return to your base. Because wherever you're running, you don't know where you're running. You know, we set goalposts. We set milestones to achieve. It's an impossibility. Therefore, if you set that as your goalpost, you might as well not get off. Maybe it's not one start, because it's impossible. What was the problem with the Greeks and the Jews? The Greeks did not want to destroy us. They revered us because we have one of a kind of wisdom and knowledge. The blessing Noach gave to Yefes, which the Greeks descend from Yefes, Japheth, the son of Noach, he said, you should, because they covered his nakedness, Shem and Yefes, the two sons of Noach, after he was drunk and he was castrated, sodomized, and they were concerned for the father's shame, he said, Yefes should dwell in the tents of Shem. That's what he said, meaning Yefes will revere and be very attracted to the tents of Shem because of the intellectualism, the dimension of understanding the Jews have, which nobody has that level of understanding. If we would agree to be Hellenized and accept their idolatry, they would have actually esteemed us and revered us at the most advanced level. But what did the Jews say? We're not on the same page. What you consider wisdom, and we consider wisdom, is a different thing. As brilliant as we may be, as exceptional as we may be, our intellect is limited to the parameters which God sets for us. You can't go beyond those parameters. The question is, why not? Let's go for the stars. Let's expand beyond our horizons. As long as it's not contrary to what the Torah says, you can expand. So you're always working within the parameters of Torah. Because when you work within the parameters of Torah, and we speak about the 13 methodologies to interpret the Torah, God gave you the key, the code, how to decipher that code. That is the key, how to decipher the code. But if he didn't give you the code, the deciphering, the key to decipher the code, it's a locked box. You can't go there. So the Jews, Rabbi Akiva, as great as he was, he understood. As much as I'd like to go there, I can't go there. Because even if I go there, it's beyond our comprehension. Because it's something we can't fathom. The Greeks not believing in God, believing that everything is deity. A deity is finite. If it's finite, why can't you go there? They're finite, we're finite. We're endowed with an intelligence. There's no reason to go way out there. The Jews themselves, we don't believe in deities. We don't believe in powers. There's only one supreme power, God himself. If that's the case, God himself, he's unfathomable because he's infinite. Therefore, we're limited to the parameters which he sets for us to be able to have an inkling of who he is. We know he's the wisest because there's nobody as wise as he. But do we know how wise he is? Impossible. Not possible to know. As I'm talking, I'm thinking that we find that Yaakov, when he had the prophecy on Mount Moriah, when he was fleeing from his father's home, he saw angels ascending and descending. And each of the angels that ascended were one of the archangels of the exiles. The last angel to ascend was the archangel of the Edomites, which was still experiencing that exile now over 2,000 years. They destroyed the second Beis Hamikdash, the second temple. And he sees them ascend and ascend. The previous angels, they ascended and they descended afterwards. They went up so many rungs on the ladder and came down. Edom just keeps going, doesn't descend. Yaakov is terrified. That means forever we're locked into this exile. Hashem says to Yaakov, if he doesn't come down himself, I will take him down. I will take him down. Forcefully, I will take him down. But why does he just keep going? Because he believes that he could go to the nth degree. There's no limit to where he can't go. Hashem teaches him, as we say in Hebrew, ad kan, up to this point, not beyond that point. When you reach that point, I will topple you. And that's what God says. If he doesn't come to that realization himself, I will take him down. And that's the only way he's coming down. We read in the Balaturim, we just read in last week's reading, there are 4 expressions of exile. And that's why we drink the 4 cups of wine at the Seder. Each one corresponds to one of the expressions of exile. The last expression of exile is V'lokachti. And I will V'lokachti eschem li'la'om. I will take you to me, for me as a people. And I will be your God. That's the last expression of the redemption. So the Baal Turim says that corresponds to the Edomite exile. What is the connotation of V'lokachti? Hotseis means I will take you out. Ga'alti, I will redeem you. What is V'lokachti? I will take you. There's a connotation, forcefully I will take you. I will wrench you out. As much as Edom doesn't want to let go, I will wrench you out of there. That means I will topple him. By destroying Edom, I will be able to wrench you out. Because again, what does Edom believe? Edom believes he is the source of all power. And again, that's Esav son of Yaakov. Why does Esav despise Yaakov? Because Hakol Kol Yaakov. Because Torah is infinite. Edom says there's nothing infinite. Everything's finite. And I rule the roost. I control that physical. And that was the strain between Yaakov and Esav. Is the world backed by spirituality, or it's finite, it's all physical, and he dictates the physical? That was the struggle between Yaakov and Esav. Is there a world to come, or is there not a world to come? But it says, as he cites the Sefer Yetzirah, the work which was given this question was authored by Adam Rishon, by Adam, the book of formation. He says, in Rotz Libcho, if you have this energy to run and pursue, because that's the intellect of a person, if it's uncontrollable, you want to go to the nth degree. Shuv l'makom, return to your original place. It's like, you have a boat tethered onto the dock. Doesn't make a difference what kind of storm you have. Unless the dock is going to be torn out of its moorings, that boat is going to be attached to that dock. Of course, it's attached, it's tethered to the dock. But if that boat is not attached to the dock, when those hurricane winds come, and the current comes, it's going to blow that boat all the way to the middle of the ocean. And what happens ultimately? It goes into the oblivion. It gets destroyed. You go out there, you get destroyed. Because there's no end way you could go. But where are you going? You believe that's truth. It's not truth. Because I say, you can't speculate unless it's part of your frame of reference. That's beyond your frame of reference. Therefore, that is called ultimately self-destruction. Based on a person's paltry, relatively speaking, intelligence, very limitation. It's a hot day in the summer, and he sees a lake, and he wants to take a swim in the lake to cool off, to lower his body temperature. And based on his evaluation, it seems to be safe. But he doesn't realize that liquid is sulfuric acid. He jumps into that lake, within moments, his life ends. He totally decomposes. He disintegrates in that sulfuric acid because he believed and he thought he knows better. But you realize, unless you do certain testing on that liquid before you go in, you don't even know what you're going into. You believe you could go to certain places because you feel you have intellectual power. But because you're lacking humility, you don't realize your level of limitation. God is infinite. So a person who's an idolater says, is he really infinite? He's finite. Because the powers which control existence are deities. So if they're limited, we're both limited, both finite. Therefore, I could pursue it to the nth degree, up to the point, because it's all finite. It's like a person says, I'm going to play chess with Einstein. Einstein's a chess master, you're a chess master. Do you think you stand a chance? Before you start moving any move on the board, he's about 60 moves ahead of you. Well, he has intelligence, I have intelligence. I mean, is it even comparable? It's not comparable. Well, God is an intelligent being, I'm an intelligent being. You're a fool. Of course, if you understand who God is, that he is the endower of your intelligence, and he is intelligent on the absolute level because he's infinite, then you understand what kind of fool you are. You wouldn't open your mouth. You'd be ashamed to stand in his presence. The Gemara tells us in Avodah Zorah, it was the Roman emperor, and he says to the holy rabbi of the Mishnaic period, I'd like to meet your God. I'd like to meet your God. So the rabbi says, no problem. Let's go to the top of the highest mountain in Rome. High noon, I'm going to introduce you to my God. So they reach the summit of the mountain. The sun is burning way overhead, middle of the sky. He says to the emperor, you want to meet my God? Look into the sun. He looks into the sun for a few moments. He realizes he's getting blinded by the intense rays of the sun. He says, I can't look more. I think I'm going to lose my sight. I'm going to be blinded. So the rabbi says to the emperor, I want to ask you a question. If the sun, which is God's creation, it's too intense for you to look at, do you think you could look at the creator? Is there even a consideration? Sometimes when you realize how foolish you are, that's the answer. If you can look at the sun head on, how do you expect to look at God, who's the creator of that sun? And that's what it is. I think I could. Person says, there's no check I can't write. It's true, as long as you're alive. But God forbid, if God should pull the plug on you, there's no check you could write any longer, regardless of how much you have. Because there's a prerequisite, you got to be alive. And your mental faculty has to be in operation. One person has a stroke, and he becomes comatose. What check are you writing? Maybe they could check you into a hospital or into an asylum, but you're not writing any checks.